The morning my own daughter looked me in the eyes and calmly said, "Dad, this house isn't yours anymore." I felt something inside me shatter. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I simply nodded, wished her a good day, and stayed calmer than she expected. She thought my silence meant I had given up. She didn't know the bank had already left me a voicemail asking me to call back immediately. Before sunset, one letter would arrive that would expose a truth my daughter never imagined. If emotional family stories with unforgettable twists and meaningful life lessons speak to your heart, I'd truly appreciate you subscribing to Behind Dad. And before we continue, I'd like you to know that the pictures shown throughout this video are creative visual dramatizations created to help tell the story. They are not real photographs from my family's life. My name is James. My late wife, Margaret, and I worked for decades to buy our little family home. We missed holidays, worked overtime, and saved every extra dollar because we wanted our children to grow up with security. After Margaret passed away, that house became more than 4 walls. Every corner reminded me of her laughter. Every flower in the garden reminded me of the weekends we spent planting them together. Leaving that home would have felt like leaving her behind. My daughter Emily used to visit every Sunday with her husband, Ryan. At first they seemed caring, bringing groceries and helping around the yard. Slowly things changed. Ryan began asking strange questions about my savings, the house, and whether I had updated my will. Emily stayed quiet whenever he spoke. I noticed the change, but I kept convincing myself I was worrying for nothing. A father always wants to believe the best about his child. Then one afternoon I returned from visiting an old friend and found Ryan measuring my living room while Emily sorted through my cabinets. Ryan smiled and confidently announced that they had decided to move into the house because it made more sense for the future. Emily avoided my eyes as if she already knew how deeply those words would hurt me. I stayed calm, but inside I felt my heart breaking. Just then my phone rang. The caller ID showed the local bank. As I answered, the manager quietly said, "Mr. Carter, I believe you need to come in today. We've received paperwork involving your property that doesn't look right." My hands tightened around the phone as the bank manager asked me to come in immediately. His voice was calm, but I could hear the concern behind it. He refused to explain everything over the phone. He only repeated that some documents connected to my home had been presented at the bank that morning, and that I needed to see them with my own eyes. I looked at Emily. She still couldn't meet my eyes. Ryan suddenly became restless and asked who had called. Something told me I already knew the answer. I drove to the bank with my heart pounding. Every mile felt longer than the last. Memories of raising Emily kept flooding my mind. I remembered teaching her to ride a bicycle, helping with homework, and walking her down the aisle on her wedding day. I kept asking myself how we had ended up here. Was I too trusting? Had grief made me blind? Those questions stayed with me as I walked into the manager's office. He closed the door and carefully placed a folder on the desk. Inside were property-related forms, a loan application, and copies of signatures that looked almost identical to mine. At first glance, I barely noticed the difference. Then I looked closer. They weren't my signatures. Someone had tried to use my house as security without my permission. My stomach dropped. The manager quietly explained that one employee noticed small inconsistencies and paused the entire process before anything could be approved. Had that employee ignored those details, my home could have been placed at serious risk. As I sat there trying to understand everything, the manager handed me another envelope that had arrived by certified mail only an hour earlier. It came from the law office that had handled Margaret's estate. I hadn't heard from them in years. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a short letter asking me to meet the attorney immediately because new information had surfaced regarding my property records. Before I could even finish reading, the office door opened. Emily rushed inside crying. Ryan followed behind her, but for the first time since all this began, the confidence had completely disappeared from his face. He looked at the envelope in my hands, swallowed hard, and quietly whispered, "James, before you read the next page, there's something I need to confess." Ryan stood in the doorway with his shoulders slumped, looking nothing like the confident man who had measured my living room only hours earlier. Emily couldn't stop crying. I looked at both of them and felt torn apart inside. Part of me wanted answers. Another part wanted to wake up and discover none of this had ever happened. A father never imagines that the child he protected for decades might one day become the reason he loses sleep. The attorney, Michael Harris, arrived only a few minutes later carrying a thick legal binder. He greeted me quietly, then asked everyone to sit down. The room felt colder with every passing second. Michael opened the certified envelope and removed several official documents. He explained that after Margaret's passing, she had created additional legal protections for our home, because she worried someone under financial pressure might one day make a desperate mistake. At the time, I thought she was simply being cautious. Now I realized she had seen something I never had. Ryan finally admitted the truth. His business had been buried in debt for months. Collection notices kept arriving, and he was terrified of losing everything. Instead of asking me for help, he secretly prepared loan papers using my property as collateral. He believed that once the loan was approved, he could save his company, repay everything quickly, and I would never know what happened. Emily confessed she discovered the plan only after the paperwork had already been submitted. She begged Ryan to stop, but fear kept both of them silent. Hearing those words hurt more than I can describe. My daughter hadn't stolen my house, but she had hidden the truth from me. Michael slowly turned to the final section of the binder and placed one sealed envelope on the table. Margaret's signature was written across the front in the handwriting I knew so well. My chest tightened instantly. Michael looked at me and said softly, "James, your wife instructed me to open this only if anyone ever tried to use your home without your permission." Emily covered her face with both hands. Ryan closed his eyes. I reached for the envelope, knowing that whatever Margaret had written would change every one of our lives forever. My hands shook as I opened Margaret's final envelope. For a moment, I couldn't read because my eyes filled with tears. Her letter wasn't written with anger. It was written with wisdom. She said that love without honesty could never keep a family together. She explained that if anyone ever tried to use our home for personal gain without my knowledge, every legal protection she had created would immediately take effect. Then I reached the final paragraph. She wrote that if our daughter admitted the truth before permanent damage was done, she hoped I would choose forgiveness instead of revenge, because healing a family was worth more than winning an argument. Even after she was gone, Margaret was still trying to save us. Ryan finally confessed everything. His company had collapsed under thousands of dollars in debt, and he convinced himself that using my home as collateral was the only way to survive. He admitted forging documents, believing he could fix everything before I ever found out. Emily broke down completely. She told me she had begged him to stop, but was too afraid to tell me the truth because she feared losing her marriage. Looking at my daughter through her tears, I realized silence had nearly cost her both her father and her future. Michael calmly explained that none of the false paperwork had any legal effect because the bank discovered the irregularities before approving anything. Margaret's trust also blocked any attempt to use my property without my written consent. My home, my savings, and everything we had built together remained completely protected. Ryan accepted responsibility, withdrew every false document, and apologized without making excuses. For the first time that day, I believed he truly understood what he had almost destroyed. Trust would take years to rebuild, but at least the truth had finally replaced the lies. That evening I stood alone on my front porch, watching the sunset Margaret loved so much. I realized I hadn't won because someone else lost. I had simply been protected by the woman who loved our family enough to prepare for a day she prayed would never come. If this story touched your heart, please leave a comment because your words may encourage someone to choose honesty before one bad decision changes everything. Share this story with someone who believes parents deserve respect, love, and gratitude while they are still here. Thank you for spending this time with me on Behind Dad. Remember, the greatest inheritance a family can leave behind isn't a house or money. It is the courage to tell the truth before it's too late.